Well, that was a lot this morning, wasn't it, already? A lot of really good news, a lot of really good products coming out. I'm going to start by asking our gentlemen to just introduce themselves, give us a little bit of background on what you're doing at
Sure.
your
You want
companies.
to go, Bob?
Sure, I'll go. Before we do that, are we going to do any live demos or no live demos?
Yeah, you've got to do them all, Bob.
Very nice to be here. I'm Bob Victor. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Comcast Business. And Comcast Business is a $10 billion B2B telecom firm. We have a small business segment, which is about 2.5 million customers, which is about a quarter of all of the small businesses in the US as our customers. And then an enterprise business, which basically is a multi-site business these are enterprises that have sites all over the world. In addition to being Chief Product Officer, I oversee all of our AI initiatives across Comcast Business.
Awesome.
Edmond?
I'm Edmond Mackey, Chief Strategy Officer at Aptive Environmental. Aptive, we primarily do residential pest control. We're in 38 states, roughly 700,000 customers. And my job at Aptive is obviously I lead strategy, but also I lead, all of the resource and capital allocation for projects across the enterprise, along with customer support and some of the field support initiatives.
Awesome. All right, so I think Ping even mentioned it this morning. Everyone's heard about the MIT study with the 95% figure. And let's keep in mind that those are just the pilots. We're supposed to fail fast, right?
Yeah.
But what are some of the characteristics that you have seen in your experiences that can help the audience in terms of how can you not fail? Like what are the 5% doing that are not failing in those pilots? Give us some of your insights on that.
I mean, for me, I might be in the minority here, but I think that if it starts with replacing XYZ
That's right.
or, reducing cost by X, I think you're probably starting in the wrong place. I think that at least the ones that we've seen that are meeting hurdles and giving you return on investment are things that either are about enhancing revenue, increasing sales conversions, either upping, I'll say, just escalating the customer experience. And so I think where you start matters, and because it also affects what you're going to measure. And so for me, the cost cutting type initiatives are the ones that struggle to kind of meet hurdles.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's 95%. I mentioned I oversee our AI initiatives across Comcast Business, and we have some initiatives that are just massive that involve the whole company, even all of Comcast beyond Comcast Business. At the same time, we're very supportive and encouraging of people just to get out and try things. And as you think about projects, and I don't know if John's here, we were talking about this morning, whether AI agents are going to replace people. But for sure, I think all of us believe people using AI will replace people not using AI. And so we've been really trying to promote, our workforce to adopt, try little things. And if you think about ROI, it's a mix of, how big is the investment, versus the return. So we're very much of the mind of let 1,000 flowers bloom. At the same time, I think as those then tend to scale, then you have an issue of, well, how do you actually rationalize those projects as they really grow up and become pretty big and start bumping up against each other?
I know. I found, I didn't really introduce myself, but I'm Robin Gareiss. I'm CEO of Metrigy. And one of the things we do is conduct a lot of research with ITCX and business unit leaders just to find out what they're doing, who they're using, where they're driving success. And when we look at these areas, one of the big problems I see is companies just trying to boil the ocean. And it happens a lot with larger companies. When we look at the companies in our research that are the most successful, the average company size is about 3,300 employees. The average company size in the non-success group, those who are not driving the highest measurable business output and success, they're about 11,000. So larger companies tend to, I don't know if you guys have seen that, like they're trying to boil the ocean. They don't have this, very deliberate reason they're rolling out a particular technology. Like what business use case or what problem or what opportunity are you trying to address? Have you seen that in your, experience?
I mean, actually, I'm sure every single person who works at Cresta here would appreciate this. When you're dealing with a large company, you're dealing with organized, massive IT organizations,
Yeah.
formal procurement processes, you know, lawyers and legal that are saying, okay, well, let's talk about data governance and data privacy. So there's a bit of overhead that comes with working with large companies. And the good news is if you can get past it and get in, it's a barrier to entry of everyone else getting in, but it does make some of the programs harder to start. At the same time, individual employees, I mean, the whole SaaS model of just getting work groups and teams to start using something, which you can kind of fly under the radar screen of everything. I mean, that also tends to work effectively. So it's this mix of, for large companies, how do you get past the bureaucracy, or how do you find groups to start?
Yeah.
I think that at least what we found is we have one of the categories we look at is kind of like how many departments is this going to touch. I do think that the more departments it touches, the less likely it probably is to, AI aside, a project or a pilot is probably least likely to succeed.
Interesting.
So I think that
Yeah.
pinpointing, it's also just a natural check on, is it focused? Meaning if it takes 3 departments to coordinate, then really is it focused on one thing you're trying to move or one metric you're trying to move, or is this just a sort of committee-led,
Yeah.
feel-good, operation?
Or is it something that the CEO comes in and says, we've got to have AI, why don't we have this right now? And
Yes.
everyone just kind of scrambles and there's really no reason behind it.
Yeah,
Those
we
are
don't
some of the
know.
things.
I think Edmond's point is great. I mean, that quote again, 95% of projects
Yeah.
fail. You know, I was at a Wall Street Journal technology conference of technology leaders and CIOs, and the question was, you know, is AI success primarily a technology challenge or a leadership challenge? And like 95% of the people there said it's a leadership challenge.
Totally.
And, you know, as Edward said, when you get to cross departments, you know, if you're running a department, you can kind of run your department and get things done. If you're then working for 3 departments, it's just much harder leadership challenge.
For sure.
Yeah, great points. So, what do you see as a strong business case for AI inside of a large organization? And I know we can talk about all different output factors there. One of the things I'd love if you could touch on is sales. You know, like we always hear about AI being able to help solve customer service issues more quickly, but what about sales? I mean, we look at our research now, 58% of companies have a sales quota attached to their service agents. And you know, AI obviously can help there. I think in about 84% of companies, AI is helping. But no, I'm sorry, 64%, wrong number. But anyway, what do you guys think? What makes a good business use case?
So, I mean, it's an interesting question, actually. 2 points. One is, you know, on the first question, what makes a good use case? If you can find areas with lots of people and then make lots of people more productive, you know, repeatable ways, you can then drive kind of accelerated returns. It's also interesting, sales. I was thinking about this yesterday. We had our kind of annual senior leadership team offsite, and we were talking about enterprise sales, and we were looking at, you know, we've hired a lot of new enterprise salespeople. We looked at quota attainment, and we were kind of sitting well below where we need to be across not only the new salespeople and the old salespeople. And, you know, the conversation turned to, look, we're really going to have to make some hard decisions about salespeople and really kind of focus on, you know, taking out the underachievers and bringing in people who can achieve. And I was sitting there thinking, you know, this may be a sales enablement issue. If we can make those people more productive, and are they, you know, in our business at least, we're really transforming from selling connectivity to selling advanced secure networking solutions and compute. So we have a sales team, an enterprise sales team that is trying to do something new. And I just wonder, you know, if we need new people or if we can more effectively train and support those people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that sales enablement is one of those areas where I think AI is probably still underused. You know, we use it for our salespeople to give them a little bit about the home, what service offering may work in the home, what price points, the guardrails on the price points, for them to be able to pitch. I think that those things, like you call sales enablement, the value of a salesperson is closing business.
Yeah.
And if you think about all the things that a salesperson does outside of closing business, I think those are ripe areas for an AI business case. It's one, you know, it's going to enhance growth. It's going to increase conversions. It's going to increase average order value and those types of things without necessarily replacing a whole bunch of processes in the background. But it could make that person more effective at what they do well. And it also raises the boat of the lower performers, because a lot of things the lower performers don't do is that sort of research to get the close or get the business, the little sort of little, making the extra phone calls and things like that. That's how those lower performers, they're less likely to do those things. But that's a place where AI can reach out
Can
for them.
highlight that, right? And
reach
make
out for
them better, raise the bar, continue to
Exactly.
raise the bar for everybody. What about, like, when you think about spending itself right now, do companies have to justify all of their spending? Do they have room for experimentation, when it comes to trying to drive a business case?
I mean, one rule that I try to adhere to in our business is we try to look for 10%. I call it like sandbox money,
Okay.
play money.
Okay.
So the whole thing of an ROI. I know that's the topic of this forum here, but ROI can be manipulated, by the time of investment, the return, because the
Sure.
return is built off of assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes we talk ourselves out of doing something that could be a transformative thing for the business because we're not sure of creating the assumptions that then create the return profile within the business case. And so someone, we're worried about someone saying, oh, you're really gonna get 10 percentage point conversion rate improvement? That seems like a lot, doesn't it? Why don't we bump that down to a more conservative? And it's like, well, if you've tested it and it's doing 15 percentage points better in your testing, then why not put the 10
Yeah, exactly.
in the business case? But we tend to, with ROI, we tend to get with the finance person and everyone is pressure testing the assumptions, and all that's doing is drawing down the return, which then means you can't invest as much as you want to be able to get the payoff.
Yeah.
100%. I agree with all that. The short answer is yes. Like every dollar in a big company, these days is totally heavily scrutinized. And you have this real tension between you have an annual budget and then you've got a long-term plan. And you look at the productivity you'll need 5 years out, but you've got to hit this quarter or this year's budget.
Sure.
And if you come up short, the first question is, okay, well, what projects can we freeze or what can we stop or what can we push out a quarter? So there's tremendous pressure. I mean, but to Edmond's point as well, I think the way through that is how can we, in low-cost ways, prove something in so that there's a high degree of certainty. You start small and you build upon that success because you can only do so many really, really large initiatives.
That's right. That's right. And I think, too, one of the big differentiators we see within companies is whether they have a chief AI officer, a chief customer officer, or not. Like companies that do have those roles, I find are generally more successful. They generally are, meeting numbers, or have higher CSAT, things like that. Which actually brings me to another question about metrics that people use. Like we see companies using obviously revenue and costs, but what about things like efficiency and CSAT improvements? Like, how do you measure that kind of stuff when you're looking at AI and how it's going to improve CSAT? What are you doing to measure it? What are the key factors there?
You want to take that one?
I mean, I think, thank you very much, Edmond. Something like, actually, CSAT isn't that hard to measure, but what's hard to, because we measure net promoter, we have a net promoter score, and we can measure what our net promoter score is. What's really hard is to measure the things that make a difference. Because everyone, we can do surveys of customers and we know what our NPS score is. But if we say, look, let's improve the experience that customers have on the phone with our agents, how do we do that, and how do we measure that, and how do we know, even if they've got a better score, how that translates into the high-level NPS metric? Say churn is a bit the same way. You sort of say, okay, well, if we improve our net promoter score, churn's going to go down, but it's really hard to draw a direct line between
The connection, yeah.
NPS and churn. So these things are just really hard to measure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a caveman in this kind of regard with CSAT and NPS and all those things, just because, I've worked at large companies and everyone reports better NPS scores and CSAT scores, but churn is the same or worse. Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, if it doesn't improve churn, then what's the big deal, right? So for me, I like to look at more short-term metrics that might be a leading indicator.
Such as what?
And I don't believe that CSAT and NPS are necessarily leading indicators of churn or increased customer lifetime value. But what is annual revenue dollars from that customer. right? If I know if I improve the annual revenue dollars from that customer, I am improving the LTV of that customer, right? And so as long as it's not destroying value in the future, right? So I think people underthink things like upgrades. If somebody's more satisfied, they would upgrade.
Yeah.
Proactive renewals. Did they
Yeah.
renew the contract? These are things that actually improve churn rate and improve LTV, but we don't think of them a lot when we're thinking about AI projects, which is why I think that some of these new projects are in that sort of, I hate to say failure category. I don't think any experiment is really a failure, but they're not giving you the return you want because you're looking for things that are soft metrics as opposed to hard metrics like did I increase
Yeah.
revenue from that customer? Did that customer renew their annual contract or
Yeah.
2-year contract, right? And so those are the types of things that I found to be more fruitful in sort of being a better predictor of LTV than things like CSAT.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. I think when you so the predictor is if a customer is with you, stays with you, expands that relationship, that's kind of the outcome you want. The question then is how can CSAT predict that? And it's not really CSAT itself. And what we found is if we just had an annual survey of CSAT with our customers, we'd score here. But if we told all of our salespeople, look, go proactively to your customer, tell them we're going to run this CSAT survey, and tell them your comp is going to be affected, and that if there's anything that they're not happy with, please tell me so I can address it before you get the survey. CSAT actually will go up, but that's probably a
Interesting.
behavioral driver
Yeah.
that leads to these long
For sure it
relationships.
is.
Yeah.
Yes.
I found that in this era of AI coming into everything, that many companies are totally like resetting their benchmarks. What are they looking at? What matters? Kind of what you were saying. Like some of these things matter, some of them don't, and some of them matter at different times in the
Yes.
life cycle. And I found that many companies are just kind of resetting. Let's take something like average handle time to solve an issue. That's completely changing. It's going way up because AI is handling the easy things and humans are handling the more complex things which take longer. So some of it's just a math problem that you don't have the lower 2-minute 1-minute calls to bring down the average, but also you have AI coming in and doing things like, okay, great, you solved the problem in 25% less time. Now let's take those extra X number of minutes and do an upsell pitch.
Yes.
And then maybe the whole call is going to actually take longer, but nobody cares because you've solved a problem and you're bringing revenue into the company. So I find that a lot of companies are really resetting these benchmarks now, and there's a lot of confusion right now around benchmarks. That's one of the reasons I really think interaction analytics or conversation analytics is huge. So taking AI and looking at every single conversation that you have in your company and pulling out these nuggets, of what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? How are they affecting a gazillion different metrics? And you can get so creative with that. What do you guys think of that? The whole area of interaction analytics, conversation analytics, using AI to dig into your conversations with customers.
For us, one of the things I stress with my team is insights are not in the average.
Okay.
Insights are in segmented. And so to your question about, insights around conversations, those are individual conversations that you can then categorize and group
Yeah.
to a larger category. But you're going to find the insight in the segmentation of those types of topics,
Okay.
as opposed to looking at a big category like billing questions or booking questions, right? You might have to get more specific around the types of things they're booking or calling in for, and then segment that down to, even if it's something like geography or the agent themselves that are having those conversations, you'll find, the insights that lead you to, hey, why is this one agent, they say their script a little bit different way, but they get an outsized outcome.
Yeah.
Why don't we take that and coach other agents to do that, right? Even if it's they hesitate before they say their affirmation
Yeah.
statement.
Yeah.
These little small things can make a big difference to the actual, the outcomes that you are trying to drive, right?
But you can't get so creative, right? There's so many different things you can look at.
I also think you can get lost in that stuff too.
Yeah,
Right?
true.
So,
But I think it's awesome, but I think people are just beginning to learn how to use it.
Yeah.
When you do if you record a video conference, it's great to be able to get a summary. But what's cool, and I don't think most people use this yet, is why not just query, the AI chatbot about the things that you're interested in? So you read the summary, but you may be interested in going deep in, one particular point. You said, let's not look at the average, which kind of is a summary.
Yeah.
But if this kind of conversation came up in the course of it, and some people were talking about it, and you're particularly interested in that, it gives you the opportunity and the ability to do that in a way that you've never, been able to before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we're all just beginning to learn how to use these tools.
Yeah. It's interesting, in our research, almost 90% of companies actually say that conversation data with customers is either the most valuable or among the most valuable data that they have in the entire company. And 84% say that that data should be used outside of the contact center and, in fact, with executives for company-wide decision making.
I mean, so that's amazing.
cool.
Think about
Yeah.
it. Like, you send all of your salespeople out to talk to customers.
Yeah.
If you had a recording, of all of their digital,
Yeah, right.
voice interactions, and you could bring that up, I mean, it'd be incredible what you could do with that data. You'd know exactly which customers were happy,
Yeah.
which weren't, and sometimes salespeople are trying, actually don't want you to hear those things, and they feel it's on them. But it's a way to help the salespeople. But like I said,
Yeah.
I think we're just beginning to learn how to deal with all that information.
Yeah, I think direct customer feedback. Who wouldn't want that
Yeah,
information if
exactly.
they can get it,
Yeah.
and especially in whatever format it comes in.
Well, you wouldn't want to get it if it was bad and you're responsible for it.
Yeah, right.
Fair enough.
All right, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Can you guys share with us a moment where maybe AI did not do what you thought it was going to do and how you course corrected that?
Yeah, for me, it was a sales chat bot. The sales chat bot, we found that when we deployed it, you have this, you have these aspirations of like, oh, we can do sales.
Uh-huh.
And
The bot doing sales
the
on its
bot
own with
doing sales
no
on its
human.
own
Okay.
with
Okay.
right. And so
Yep.
what we found is that the bot was good at handling, say, less surface level type objections. But we also found that in the sales process, our sales rep is doing things behind the scenes. They're looking for dates. They're looking for which route am I going to put this person on.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing that sort of like almost like 3D. The person mentions, hey, what day maybe work better for them, but they're mentioning that in the upper part of the conversation, and then you get down to the close part, and you're booking, and you're reconfirming. Well, that agent has already started pulling up the back systems needed
Really?
on those dates, and they're looking for the routes on those dates. So by the time they get to the booking part or close part, that part went seamless and fast, where with the bot, it was kind of like really, really slow and clunky
Yep.
because the human is just doing those things, sort of pre-doing those things. And the bot wasn't capable of pre-doing those things. They were doing it at the time. So for us, the learning for us was there are things that we could do instead of the AI bot being maybe customer facing. Can we get the AI bot to kind of pull up the dates and the routes and all of these things that the service or that the sales professional is doing?
The human person, yeah.
That hey, didn't help on the front end, but can we do some back end things that makes their time on the phone, a little bit shorter, so that they can close more deals and answer more calls. So the initial test being sort of a customer-facing chatbot, and it ended up being a back-end process, help administrator for sales agents.
So you're still able to get something out of it, but
Yes.
you pivoted where
Yes.
it made sense. Bob, anything that you have to add to that?
Maybe similar. About 2 years ago, ChatGPT 3.5 was released, and we had kind of our annual management offsite and said, look, for small business, we think by 2030, we shouldn't have to have any small business customer have to talk to a person. That gives us, that gives us 7 years to kind of play through this AI revolution. You look at Amazon, you can buy lots of things on Amazon. What we sell to our small business customers isn't that complicated. Why shouldn't that happen? So we said, all right, well, how can we get started? So we picked mobile. Comcast Business sells mobile services to small businesses. And we had a digital buy flow. So customers could kind of go to the website, configure their mobile offer, and add it to the bill without totally recontracting their whole product package that they get from us. And so that's probably the easiest one. And so what we set out to do was we had a chat sales agent that we kind of, through APIs, linked to our digital buy flow. And the idea was customers would call in, instead of talking to a human agent, they would talk to the chatbot. And while they were talking to the chatbot, they would see the cart kind of being filled. And people said, actually, we actually had a head of AI for the company. This is at a time we had lots of big initiatives, BHAGs. And I forget actually what exactly we called it, but it was sort of the opposite of a BHAG. It was kind of a modest, incremental, minor improvement, this selling, mobile by chatbot. So people kind of said that's sort of too easy. And so we said, well, if it's so easy, why aren't we seeing lots of other people do it? So we set off to do that. And we found a couple things. I mean, first, what we found was we couldn't kind of keep the thread of the conversation going through the whole buy flow. It's not, it wasn't actually linear at all. Or we'd get, the first couple questions would be great, but then the chat agent would just completely lose the thread of the conversation. The other was the integration between the cart and the chatbot was super complicated. And over the course of that project, we probably killed it after 3 or 4 months. We sort of realized the future is going to be web agents that just interact with the website without APIs, just natively like a human would do it. So we ended up having to call that one of the failures. But I think we learned a fair amount from it.
Yeah,
And
sounds like it.
at some point we'll be able to figure that out. But I think we're more on the human assisted side now.
So when we look at, we're talking about ROI, we always hear a lot about the return. We've been talking about some of the returns. What about the I part of that? Human development, change management, things like that. Let's talk a little bit about that. And Bob, I want to ask you. We talked a little bit before in planning for this about build versus buy. I'd like to also get into that. Like, we see a lot of companies trying to figure out, should we build our own AI agent? Should we buy it? Should a third party do it? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I would say it was our IT team that said in that, in that mobile example, we should build it. We can build that. That's not that hard.
Yeah.
And I think, in big companies, first of all, IT teams are hugely strapped. I mean, we have major billing and OSS, BSS programs to resolve. And so the teams are super busy. It's complicated. It's siloed. And so there's just I mentioned procurement, legal, all that stuff. There's just a resource issue of how do you get companies that are really big to pivot to build something when their teams might be able to build something, but really aren't expert in a certain area. So I think it's easier. So if you can figure out, partner or buy in a way that doesn't totally disrupt. I mean, if you partner, but the internal IT teams need to be kind of engaged from start to finish and need to be doing all this work, then it doesn't really solve the issue. But if you can somehow ride on top of the IT's work and not really be a drain on that resource, partner and build options tend to be very successful.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised in our research, about 45% of companies actually said they want to build their own AI agents. But then when you start drilling down and saying, well, do you have the resources to actually manage that ongoing, to make sure it stays updated? That's where the problems come in.
The problem's the scaling. I mean, you can build something off the shelf and easy, and then when it gets to scaling, you kind of realize, well, this is actually getting complicated, and then all of a sudden, you're building an internal company within the organization.
But doesn't that kind of happen all the time with a new technology that IT kind of, starts thinking, hey, we can do this. Why are we paying someone to do it?
I think that's natural for any. I don't think I've met a developer that doesn't think that they can develop something better than another developer.
Yep.
So I think that's just inherent, in developers. But I will say that human capital is more of a constraint than financial capital. And I don't think enough companies think about the human capital costs when they think about projects. Because if you have a savvy partner in technology or in IT, that savvy partner can realize that they can actually expand their human capital resources by partnering.
Yeah.
Right? Like because if they really know their strengths really well, it's like, okay, well, we're really good at integrations, so we don't need an integrative partner. We can handle that component of it, but we're not yet good at AI or these other
Yeah.
sort of transformative or technologies on the sort of edge of things, right? And so, but we know our systems, we know how to integrate with our systems, and if you can get that partner to kind of get to that place with you, then you can actually accelerate projects that you wouldn't have had the human capital to do by partnering. But you have to kind of break down those barriers with that particular, that partner on the technology side of it. Otherwise, you get I call them shadow IT organizations that live within marketing
Oh, yeah.
or sales, where they're just trying to figure something out,
Mm-hmm.
and they go and partner, and that's not good either. Because at the end of the day, if something does show promise, you have to scale it. And in order to scale it, you're going to have to integrate with
Yeah.
systems that everyone's using.
And you're never know what's wrong. A lot of like the demo we saw this morning,
I'm in
um,
love.
the
Yes.
the hotel demo, right? Like being able to see all the problems
Yeah.
and having a tool like that to fix it. Wow, I thought
Yes.
that was really cool. Actually, really, really cool. Okay, so beyond things like technology and data, as we're getting into more of the human areas, what do you think are some of the cultural shifts and organizational shifts that you need to think about within your own companies to make AI successful?
Well, I think that adoption is the biggest piece. So the mind shift for your employees, especially at the like supervisor level down to the front
Yeah.
line level, they have to know where you're trying to go. And for me, it's never about replacing people.
Hmm.
People are your sort of most valued asset. And so I think if you're bringing them along in that way, and they know that you're not trying to
That's a good point.
change
Hmm.
the workforce, or that you're only really trying to augment things that allow them to be more valuable in their roles, they're more likely to adopt. And that's where you have to have the sort of rubber meets the roads conversation. But also in your planning of the projects, then you have to hold yourself accountable as an executive leader to say, are we funding projects that are actually trying to improve the customer journey, the customer experience, the employee experience,
Hmm.
or am I actually trying to, remove 50 people from this particular process, right? And so the answer on both sides might be yes, yes, on both of those sides. But I think
Yeah.
you have to be transparent with your workforce to let them know that, hey, we're doing this primarily to increase customer experience, to affect things like churn, to get rid of the nits of processes that you have to do around your job that sort of lessen I'll say the happiness meter of your job, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone has these process things that aren't particularly productive, but they have to do those things.
Hmm.
So that's the way we're approaching it. I do think the mind shift around frontline people, especially,
Hmm.
they have the best ideas for the most part,
Yeah.
or the most practical ideas
Because they're
for the
living it
most
every
part,
day. Yeah.
because they're living it every
Yeah.
day. Sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking because we can look at data, but we're not in their seat that,
Yeah.
oh, our opinion is more valuable than theirs. But I found that if you're bringing them in the process and you're working on things that they themselves have submitted as ideas, then I think you get less pushback. But I do think it's a mind shift thing,
Yeah.
because when people hear AI in the news, it's always about replacing jobs. But so when you start to roll out AI in your
Yeah.
company, that's the first place their head is going to go.
Yeah, and AI actually can help that happiness meter too, just by
Exactly.
identifying, okay, this agent needs a break. She's kind of slow right now, or sounds kind of cranky. We're seeing that companies are giving agents 2 more 15-minute breaks per 8-hour shift on average right now, just because their jobs are different. They're constantly gear shifting with all this, hard stuff. And I think AI gives you also like kind of a lever where you can do different things depending upon the day. So if it's a really busy day, you know what, we're not going to do any upsell pitches. We're just going to get on to the next call and the next call and the next call. But if it's a slower day, hey, let's move this lever up and we can start having AI assist our live agents to do an upsell pitch. And there's it kind of steadies out the organization, so you don't end up having all this idle time. You can now not be laying people off, but because AI is making everyone so productive that there's idle time, and that is one of the biggest shifts I've seen. Some more innovative companies do with AI. Bob, what do you think about this?
Again, I think it's adoption's really interesting. Adoption is key. I think we'd all say, look, if you talk to someone about AI who doesn't use AI tools in their personal life, it's a very different conversation than if you talk to someone who's
Oh, that's a good point.
and using them. And it
Yeah.
kind of cuts two ways. First of all, at a junior level, what happens is if people are using AI tools in their personal life and they show up at work and they don't have access to the tools, they think you're crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, why can't I use these things? And all of a sudden, they don't want to hear about legal restrictions and data privacy. So you gotta cut through that to make them productive. The other is, there are a lot of senior executives that don't use these AI tools, in their personal lives and are making decisions. And a lot of them are afraid, misguided. Well, look, I always want to talk to a human, or look, these things hallucinate like crazy. We can't really trust it. But if you're a user, you kind of know, how to control for hallucinations or how it hallucinates or how they act, and you're just in a much better, lean forward way to adopt those in the organization.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, we have a minute. So I'm going to ask you one last question, quick answers. If you could give everybody one piece of advice on how to get from pilot to positive ROI, what kind of mindset shift or piece of advice would you give them?
I would say start with people. That the people who are working on the project are important to get that, but also the project itself. If you're probably starting from a place that, hey, this is going to improve customer experience or it's going to improve employee experience, then you're probably going to be able to roll that out because
Be
people will.
successful.
There's a very clear reason to roll it out. If it's something other than that, because there is inertia needed to push something from pilot to full rollout, and whether we like it to admit it or not as executives, the reason people are doing those things is important to those people who are doing
That's
those
right.
things.
Yeah.
And so I think if you start from those places, then the likelihood that you're able to go from pilot to full rollout is a little bit smoother.
You get the last word, Bob.
Two things. I would first not be overly ambitious, but I would start from the outcome. So be very explicit on, here's what I'm trying to achieve. If I could do this, can we all agree that that would be valuable? And really getting conversations around, okay, are we all really sure we're aligned on the outcome, and if we can achieve that outcome, no brainer, we'd all like to do that. If you can get buy-in on that, you can then work backwards to say, okay, well, what do I need to do to have huge confidence that I can achieve that outcome?
Yep.
How long does it take? And if it takes too long, or if it's too complicated, or you got to do too many steps before you get to that outcome, it's then change the outcome or re-envision the problem. But imagining that outcome and then having a clear line between implementation and achieving the outcome is critical.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your great insights today. I mean, fantastic advice and experience that you've shared with everybody. And they will be around the rest of the conference, I'm sure, to field questions if anybody wants to talk, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you, Edmond. Thanks, Robin. All right, with that, none of us in this room are going to be a part of that 95% of failed Gen AI pilots, okay? I think we'll be more a part of the 5%. All right, you've got a 15-minute break that'll start now, so I'll see you all back here in 15 minutes.